After my parents passed away, I inherited their massive home, which was worth $155 million. It was a stunning estate, one I could hardly believe was now mine. A few days after moving in, my life took an unexpected and painful turn. One afternoon, my mother-in-law, Amelia, barged in with my sister-in-law, Freya, and brother-in-law, William. They showed up uninvited, with no warning, and immediately demanded that I listen to them. My heart raced as they stormed in, their faces hard and determined. "Sophia, we need to talk," Amelia said, her tone cold and demanding. I looked up, confused and uneasy. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to make sense of their presence. "We've got some documents you need to see," Freya added, a smug look creeping onto her face. My stomach sank as I took the papers from them. They were fake, badly forged documents trying to claim ownership of the house that had been left to me. I was in shock as I read through them, the realization hitting me like a ton of bricks. This was a bold attempt to take my home away from me. "What is this?" I asked, my voice shaking with disbelief. "You can't just claim this house as yours." "Oh, but we can," William said with a sneer, crossing his arms. "According to these documents, this mansion belongs to James's family. Now it's time for you to leave." I looked at James, hoping for some kind of support, some sign that he would stand by me. But instead, he stood there, silent, his arms crossed, his face emotionless. Couldn't believe it. My own husband was standing with his family, not offering a word in my defense. "James, please, say something," I begged, my voice trembling with desperation. But he remained silent, like a stone wall, not even acknowledging me. "This is for the best," Amelia said in a sickly sweet voice. "You'll be much happier once we're the ones making the decisions. You don't need this kind of burden." I felt a fiery anger build inside me. "This is my home. I'm not leaving. You have no right to take it from me," I shouted, trying to stand my ground. But Amelia wasn't done. Her face twisted in fury, and without warning, she lunged at me, slapping me across the face. I staggered back, completely stunned. My mind raced as I tried to process what had just happened. "Are you really going to let her talk to us like that?" Freya screamed at James, her face contorted with rage. "Why are you just standing there?" William, encouraged by their support, started grabbing my things. My personal sketches, my belongings, and tossing them out the door. "Get out! Mom said so," he yelled, his words cutting through me like knives. I stood frozen, feeling utterly powerless as my life was being thrown out before my eyes. My own husband, the person I trusted more than anyone, stood by and did nothing. "James!" I cried out, my voice breaking with pain and desperation. "Please, help me." But James didn't move. He didn't speak. His silence was more deafening than any shout. I felt a combination of anger and heartbreak like I'd never felt before. The man I thought I could count on wasn't just silent. He was standing with the people who were trying to destroy everything I held dear. I felt betrayed in the deepest way. "Enough!" I screamed, my voice shaking with fury as I tried to gather whatever strength I had left. "Get out of my house. You have no right to do this." Amelia stepped closer, her presence heavy and menacing. "You think you can just keep all of this for yourself?" she sneered. "This house belongs to us now. You're just a guest here." The words stung, each one more painful than the last. I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on me as the reality of what was happening sank in. I was losing everything. My home, my family, and most painfully, my own husband. In that moment, I realized I was completely alone. But I wasn't about to let them win. Couldn't. The weight of the situation felt unbearable. I could almost feel the walls of the house closing in on me, pressing down until I could hardly breathe. The place that was supposed to be my safe haven, the house that had once been filled with my parents' love and my dreams, was now being stripped away, piece by piece. Finally, James spoke up, his voice lacking any real conviction. "Sophia, this isn't worth it," he said. "Let's just talk about this later." Talk about what? I thought. How could he stand there, so detached, when I was being bullied into giving up my home? "You're letting them push me out," I snapped, the betrayal crashing over me like a wave. It felt like I was losing everything. My home, my dreams, and worst of all, my husband. As the confrontation continued, Amelia grabbed my arm, trying to force me to back down. In that instant, I snapped. "Don't you dare touch me!" I yelled, furious beyond words. The weight of their greed, their sense of entitlement, was suffocating. I knew in that moment that I couldn't let them take this from me. Not without a fight. "You won't take this house from me," I said, my voice steady with determination. "I won't go quietly." William, standing in the doorway with a cruel laugh, sneered at me. "You think you can fight us?" he said. "You're all alone here, Sophia. James is with us." Tears of frustration filled my eyes as I looked around the room. My personal belongings were scattered across the floor, my sketches and memories tossed aside like they didn't matter. The home I had once dreamed of filling with warmth and love now felt like a cold, empty prison. "I'm not alone," I said, my voice stronger now. "I have the law on my side. You can't just barge in here and take what isn't yours." Amelia paused, momentarily taken aback. For the first time, her smug confidence faltered. "You really think you can do this?" she asked, her voice dripping with disdain. "You'll regret this, Sophia." That moment Willie aimed the beginning of my fight. I felt a fire ignite within me, a spark of determination that told me I wasn't going down without a battle. This wasn't just about protecting my home. It was about fighting for my identity, my dignity. The road ahead would be long, but I was ready to face it. I wasn't going to let them take everything from me. The days that followed the confrontation were a blur. I wandered through the mansion, each room now a reminder of everything I was about to lose. The walls that had once echoed with the laughter of family now seemed to suffocate me, pressing in with the weight of memories I couldn't shake. James, on the other hand, retreated further into himself. He was distant, lost in his own thoughts, leaving me to deal with everything on my own. I wanted to reach out to him, to ask for his support, but every time I did, he brushed me off. "I just need time to think," he would say. But it felt like he was slipping further away from me with every passing day. One evening, I sat in the living room, staring at the mess and the chaos that had unfolded. The house, once filled with potential and dreams, now felt like a hollow shell. I couldn't just sit back and wait for James to change his mind. I had to take matters into my own hands. The thought of losing my home, my sanctuary, was unbearable. I refused to let my in-laws walk all over me. I picked up my phone and dialed a lawyer. "Hello, this is Sophia. I need help regarding my property," I said, trying to keep my voice calm despite the turmoil inside. The lawyer, a calm and collected man named Mr. Daniel, listened carefully as I explained everything that had happened. "Sophia, it sounds like you have a strong case," he said, his voice reassuring. "We need to act quickly. Gather all your documents, any evidence you have of ownership, and we'll make sure they can't move in permanently." His words were a lifeline, and I felt a renewed sense of determination. Over the next few days, I gathered everything I could. My parents' will, property deeds, anything that would prove my ownership of the house. I also documented the confrontation, recording the threats and aggression from James's family. Each piece of evidence felt like a shield, something I could use to protect myself from the storm that was coming. When I met with Mr. Daniel again, he was confident and clear. "We can file for a restraining order against them to prevent any further harassment. It's crucial that we establish your legal right to the property." With his guidance, I felt empowered. I knew what I had to do. That evening, I returned home to find James sitting at the kitchen table, his head buried in his hands. His posture was one of defeat, but there was still something in his eyes, something that told me he knew he was losing me. I took a deep breath, walked over to him and said, "James, we need to talk. I'm taking legal action against your family." He looked up at me, his eyes wide with shock. "Sophia, don't do this," he said, his voice full of concern. "It will only make things worse." "You don't understand," I replied, frustration bubbling up in my chest. "They're trying to take my home." "My home, James. I can't just sit back and let that happen." He shook his head, his face contorted in frustration. "You don't understand. My mother is not someone you want to cross. She'll make your life miserable. I could feel my heart racing as I responded. She already has. This is my life, James. You should be on my side. James stood up abruptly, running his hands through his hair. I just need time to think, he said, his voice cold. You're pushing me away. The words hit me harder than I expected. I felt a deep sense of betrayal wash over me. I couldn't wait any longer. I had to fight for myself. James turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, feeling more alone than ever. But instead of giving in to despair, something else sparked inside me. A flicker of resilience, a determination to fight for what was rightfully mine. I couldn't count on anyone else to fight for me. I had to be my own advocate. The following week, I filed for the restraining order against Amelia. It was the first step in what would be a long and difficult journey, but I was ready. No matter what happened next, I would not back down. I was taking control of my future, and I would not let anyone take it away from me. The days leading up to the court hearing felt like an eternity. I spent hours preparing my case, going over every detail in my notes, mentally preparing for what was to come. I knew this would be a turning point in my life, a moment that would determine my future. The thought of facing James's family in court, with everything on the line, filled me with both anxiety and resolve. On the day of the hearing, I arrived at the courthouse, my heart pounding in my chest. I wore my best suit, trying my hardest to project confidence, though inside, I felt like my nerves might get the best of me. As I entered the courtroom, I immediately spotted James sitting with his family. Their expressions were a mix of anger and disdain, and I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I took a deep breath, walking to my side of the courtroom, feeling the weight of my decision press heavily on me. When the judge entered, everything became official. The proceedings began, and I stood up to present my case. I detailed the invasion of my home, the threats that had been made, and the deep sense of betrayal that came with my in-laws' actions. Every word I spoke felt like a declaration of my right to stand my ground. When I finished, I glanced at James, hoping for a flicker of support or recognition. But he remained motionless, his face as cold and unreadable as ever. My heart sank, but I didn't let it show. This wasn't just about protecting a house, it was about protecting myself. When the judge ruled in my favor and granted the restraining order, a wave of relief swept over me. I had taken a stand, and it felt empowering. As I left the courthouse, a small sense of victory settled in. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had control over my life again. I was no longer a passive victim in this situation. I was ready to fight for my home, my future, and everything I had worked so hard for. But despite this victory, I knew the battle wasn't over. James's family wouldn't back down easily, and I couldn't afford to let my guard down. I needed to prepare myself for what was to come. As much as I wanted to feel secure, I knew that the real challenge still lay ahead, confronting James and his family. At home, the tension was suffocating. James seemed to avoid me more than ever, retreating into his thoughts. He spent long hours staring out the window, lost in his own world. It was painful to watch him struggle, caught between his loyalty to his family and his commitment to me. I could see the conflict in his eyes, but I wasn't sure if he even knew how to choose. One evening, as I was sitting in the living room, I heard a knock at the door. My heart raced as I peered through the peephole and saw James standing on the other side, looking disheveled and anxious. I opened the door cautiously, trying to steady my emotions. "James, what do you want?" I asked, my voice steady but guarded. He stepped inside, glancing around nervously. "We need to talk," he said, his tone serious. "About what?" I replied, crossing my arms. "Your family's latest scheme?" James hesitated for a moment before speaking, his eyes pleading for my understanding. "Sophia, I'm trying to understand what's happening. My mom is furious. She says she'll do whatever it takes to get that house." I took a deep breath, trying to remain composed despite the anger bubbling inside me. "James, this is my home. I'm not going to let them take it from me. You need to stand with me, not with them." James's voice trembled, the uncertainty clear in his words. "I don't know if I can do that. You don't know what she's capable of." I stared at him, the pain of his words cutting deep. "Then why did you marry me?" I shot back, the anger rising inside me. "I thought we were a team. I thought you loved me." James hung his head, clearly torn. "I do love you, Sophia, but family is everything to me. I can't just turn my back on them." His words were like a dagger to my heart. I felt a sharp pang of betrayal. "So you'll choose them over me? After everything that's happened?" Before he could respond, a loud crash outside caught our attention. We rushed to the window and saw Amelia, Freya, and William standing on the front lawn, angrily confronting a group of movers. My heart sank as I realized what was happening. They were trying to move their things into my house, completely disregarding the restraining order. "James, they're breaking the law," I shouted, my voice shaking with anger and panic. "We need to call the police." "No, don't do that," he pleaded, panic creeping into his voice. "It'll only make things worse." "Worse than this?" I demanded, incredulous. "They're trying to take over my house." I reached for my phone, but before I could dial, James grabbed my arm, his grip firm but desperate. "Please, Sophia, just give me a moment to talk to them." I was torn. On one hand, I wanted to let James handle it, to give him a chance to work things out with his family. But on the other hand, I was done waiting. No more talking. I couldn't allow this to go on any longer. "No, James. This ends now," I said, my voice unwavering. I dialed 911, my heart pounding as I explained the situation to the operator. They assured me that help was on the way, but I couldn't shake the feeling of dread building in my chest. As I hung up, I turned to see James's family still arguing with the movers on the lawn. Their faces were flushed with anger, and I knew this confrontation was far from over. I stepped outside, my heart racing as I made my way to the porch. "You are not welcome here," I shouted, my voice cutting through the chaos. "Get off my property." Amelia turned to me, her eyes blazing with fury. "You think you can just kick us out?" she spat. "This is our home too." Her words stung, but I refused to back down. The sound of sirens filled the air, and I felt a surge of relief mixed with fear. I knew this confrontation was only the beginning, but in that moment, I felt like I had finally regained some control. The battle for my home was far from over, but I was ready for whatever came next. Finally, I was taking a stand, but the weight of the situation pressed heavily on me. The moment the police arrived, I stepped forward, ready to explain everything, but James remained silent, standing apart from his family, torn between his loyalty to them and his love for me. The air was thick with tension as the officers assessed the scene. "Officers, they're violating a restraining order," I said, pointing toward my in-laws. "They're trying to take over my home." The officers moved in, their faces showing clear frustration as they tried to make sense of the chaos unfolding before them. One officer turned to me. "Ma'am, do you have documentation for the restraining order?" I nodded and quickly retrieved the papers from inside the house, my heart pounding in my chest. As I handed the documents over, I caught a glimpse of James's face, a mix of regret and worry. I knew this moment was pivotal, not only for my home but for our relationship as well. The weight of it all hung between us. As the officers spoke with Amelia and the others, I felt a wave of empowerment wash over me. For the first time in weeks, I was reclaiming my space, my sanctuary. No one could take that from me again. The tension in the air was palpable as the officers took statements from everyone involved. I stood off to the side, my heart racing, a cocktail of fear and determination swirling inside me. This was a defining moment, not just for my home, but for my future. James was still watching me, his expression conflicted. He had always been close to his family, and I knew that choice weighed heavily on him. But I could no longer wait for him to make up his mind. I had fought too hard to let anyone dictate my life. After a tense exchange, the officers finally turned to me. "Ma'am, we need to inform you that your restraining order is valid. Your in-laws cannot be on your property. We will ask them to leave, and if they refuse, we will take further action." A rush of relief swept over me, but it was quickly overshadowed by the reality of the situation. Amelia, Freya, and William weren't going to walk away quietly. I could see the anger building within them as the officers began to escort them off the property. They weren't giving up easily. As Amelia was escorted away, she turned to me, her voice dripping with malice. "This isn't over, Sophia. You think you can just take everything from us? You'll regret this." A chill ran down my spine, but I stood my ground, meeting her gaze with unwavering confidence. "You've already taken enough from me. This is my home, and you will not take it away." The officers managed to clear the area, and after a few moments, Amelia, Freya, and William were forced to leave. I took a deep breath, feeling a sense of victory surge within me. I had stood up for myself. For the first time in weeks, I felt free. As the dust settled, I turned to James, who was still standing near the porch, his face a mixture of relief and confusion. "I can't believe this happened," he said, running a hand through his hair. "I never thought my family would go this far." I stepped closer, searching his eyes. "James, I need you to understand something. I fought for my home because it's mine. I can't live in fear of your family anymore." "I know," he replied, his voice heavy with regret. "I should have stood by you. I was just scared." "Scared of what?" I shot back, frustration rising. "Scared of your family's anger? They chose to invade our lives and threaten our future. I deserve better than that." James's voice softened. "I want to support you, Sophia. I just don't want to lose my family either." "They made their choice when they decided to attack me," I replied, my voice steady. "You need to choose me now." For a moment, James looked conflicted, but then something shifted in his expression. "You're right," he said, his tone resolute. "I can't let them control my life, or ours, anymore. I'm with you." Hearing those words felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders. We still had a long way to go, but I knew that if we both fought for it, we could rebuild our relationship. We had to. Over the next few weeks, I focused on restoring the mansion to its former glory. I hired contractors to repair the damage, and with each renovation, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The house, once a battlefield, was becoming a sanctuary, a reflection of my resilience. James and I slowly began to reconnect, sharing our dreams and making plans for the future together. I found strength in my independence, and he learned to assert his boundaries with his family. The day I finished the renovations, I stood in the living room, taking in the beautiful space we had created. It felt like a fresh start, a place that was finally mine, free from the shadows of betrayal. I was no longer the victim. I was a woman who had fought back, reclaimed her home, and rediscovered her identity. As I watched the sunset from the porch, a sense of peace settled over me. I had transformed pain into strength and betrayal into empowerment. This house, once a battleground, had become my sanctuary, a symbol of my journey from darkness into light. I was ready for whatever came next, knowing that I had the power to shape my destiny.